What is Flexbox? There's plenty of documentation online and videos about Flexbox that do deep dives into it. But the basic way to think about it is it's a way to arrange content on a web page. So on this page, you can see we've got these 4 columns that are arranged. What we don't see is what's going on behind the scenes here, right? So if we were to code a page from scratch using HTML and CSS, the code we would write would generate this particular layout, and we could use some properties of CSS Flexbox to arrange the content on the page. Now there are some resources online. One of the most popular is the CSS tricks page, which I'll post a link to. It has a big guide to what Flexbox is and the different properties available and how that would adjust layouts on the page in terms of columns and child containers and so forth. We won't get into that in depth, but I will post that as a reference. We also have Elementor's little playground where you can test out using the Elementor controls. This is not always up to date, but it's pretty recent, so it is a good place to play around. But let's go ahead and take a look at, I set up a container here, and we can examine some of the controls that are available for fiddling with these layouts. And just so you know, if I click on this icon up here with the 9 dots, I can see all my widgets, and one is a container. And a container is what we're going to be working on. If I drag it onto the page, you can see it creates this panel where I could then put other widgets inside of it, like text, for example. I'm going to delete that. Another way to add a container is to click the plus down here and to choose one of these preformed container layouts. I'll go ahead and go with the one I set up. So you can see I have a parent, and then I have 4 child containers inside of it. If I click on a child container and we look over here on the left at the settings, you can see I've set the width to 25%. And so this column 1 is only 25% of the width. And then if we look on column 2, same thing, pretty obvious, right? So that's a nice way to create a 4-column layout. If I click on the parent container here on the right in the navigator, and we study some of these controls, you'll start to see, for those of you who are familiar with Flexbox, there's certain settings we can fiddle with. So like, for example, gaps. So gaps would be the space between the child content. So right now it's by default set to 20 pixels, but I could change that to something else like 60. You see how it adjusts the space in between. And it's nice, we can actually adjust column and row. So if we actually had multiple rows inside of this, we could adjust the vertical and the horizontal spacing. So let's take a look at, I'll go ahead and turn that back to 20. What is this wrap feature here? By default, it's not wrapping, but we can turn on wrap. So that's kind of interesting. So if I turn that on, you'll notice the 4th column has now bumped down to the next line. And the reason that happens, and we will get into this in more depth in the next video about wrapping, is because we have 4 25% wide containers, and then in between each one we have a gap of 20 pixels, right? So 25% times 4 plus 3 20 pixel gaps is more than 100%. So this 4th item is going to wrap down to the next row. Now there's ways we can keep them on one line, and one is to just say don't ever wrap. And so what it does is it will just keep these on one line. So if I were to add another by duplicating it, it's just going to automatically reduce their widths to keep them fitting, which is actually quite handy when you want that to happen. So there are controls like that for Flexbox. We also have the ability to control the direction that things flow. Right now we have it set to horizontal, but I could set it to vertical. And you'll see what happens is the child containers now are flowing vertically. And since they were set to 25%, they will stay that width. But I could change it, right? Like I could make it 50. I could make it 100. This is, if you're familiar with the sections and columns model, this is, oops, typed the wrong number there. This is more powerful. We also have the ability to reverse things. We could reverse the row. We could flip them. Oops, sorry, I'm still on the child. I need to go to the parent. I could reverse them. So now we're going 4, 3, 2, 1. That's interesting, right? And we can do this per device size. So let's say on desktop, I wanted to go backwards, but on tablet, I wanted to go the normal order. I can just switch that back. So you actually have powerful ordering controls just with, say, the flow of the direction. But that's not all. I could click on a child and I could manually adjust the order. So not only does the child container have its own controls for the widgets inside of it, if I go to advanced, I can adjust things like the order. Like I could say, hey, I want number 1 to be the end. And now look, it has jumped down to the end. Or I could manually order it. So we could type a number in here. Like I could give it the number 2 or 3. And you won't notice anything yet, because I have to click on the others and give them a number. So like if I went to number 2 and said, I want you to be the 4th one, it's the 4th one now. So we could actually go and number all of these if we wanted to. I'm going to undo that because that would be confusing, but very powerful controls. We also have the ability to have items grow or shrink. And a good way to demonstrate that, I'll go back to the desktop. So let's say we wanted to set the parent to flow horizontally. And let's just go now with 2 of these. So I've got 1 and 2. Number 1 is set to 25%, right? We have our width at 25. And right now it doesn't have a grow or shrink set. If I click on number 2, let's just say I wanted this one to always expand if there was room for it. I could just go to grow, and it will fill up the remaining space. So I've basically got a 25, 75 now. But alternatively, I could do shrink. And there's even some more advanced controls where you can kind of adjust these by clicking on these little numbers to adjust how much they grow and shrink. That tends to be more useful in like a multi-column layout. But you know, that is, again, another powerful feature. An interesting usage of grow and shrink, let me see if I can easily demonstrate it or not, is in the vertical application. So sometimes you want things to be the same height. A clever thing you can sometimes do is set an item to grow, so you can see the number 2 is going to fill this remaining space here. So depending on how sophisticated we want it to get, you can put containers in containers, right? So these 2 items here could have had a parent container. We could have, say, like 3 parent containers that have items inside of them, and we could play with the grow and shrink to get things to align in a way that we like. So let's see what other types of controls are available for Flexbox. We have justification controls, so controlling how the content aligns inside a container. So you can see I vertically aligned center. I could align it to the end. I could create space between children. I could create space around them and space evenly. If you are familiar with CSS Flexbox, like if you review this document here on CSS Tricks, you'll see that a lot of the CSS sort of directives or properties you could type in are accounted for here just through the usage of visual controls, including things like alignment. So very powerful. And you could click on a child and I believe override that. So like you could see I could make number 1 go to the left, and I could click on number 2, and I think I can make it go to the end. And this can be per like desktop, tablet, mobile, right? We can change this, and we can add more breakpoints in Elementor if we so choose. So we've covered some alignment, we've covered ordering, we've covered size. Let me see if I'm missing anything else that's related to Flexbox. I think that's actually a pretty good intro. So between these item controls here and then the advanced controls, you can see we account for pretty much most of what Flexbox does. And then it just comes down to nesting. And so what we're going to want to get into next is, what about wrapping and alignment? Please let me know if you have any questions about this Elementor Flexbox in general. Please consider subscribing, and I hope you have a good day.